Hello everyone and welcome to the demonstration videos. So in this video we'll go specifically over about Java functions. You also hear me use it alternatively as a method, but you'll hear me here method, functions, either way we'll be going over the same thing here. Now once again, this video will help you with completing project 6. If you are struggling, please send me a message so we could schedule some time to go over it, or sometimes I can answer whatever you have issues with through the message. So just please make sure you're sending me a message. You could include screenshots of whatever errors you're getting on the screen, but either way, just make sure that you're reaching out whenever you're struggling. Alright, so let's take a look here. So I've created a new file, week6.java, and you can see class week6. And remember how I mentioned that this is our main method. So this is the method, this is the function that Java is actually going to be looking for first in order to execute the program. So if I run it right now, you'll see that start of program and end of program is printed out because I have these statements within the main method. If I had these outside anywhere else, you'll notice that even if I put it out here, so let's do that, it'll give me an error because it doesn't belong to a function. So remember, functions are groups of code that is actually executed. In the case of the main method, every time you hit the run button, not only does it compile your code, so that's like actually making it up. Remember, there's a compilation process which has to translate it to the computer itself. So that will occur, and then it will immediately execute the function main. So whatever is in main will go through. So you've been writing most of your code within the main function. So whether that's getting input, some kind of calculations, you did loops and branches last week, that was put in your main method. Now sometimes programs can be really large and sometimes even redundant. You'll notice that when it came to last week's code for the loops and the branches, you probably saw that a lot of the same things was happening. In this case, you were asking for maybe 2 variables. You always ask for 2 variables and it did some kind of function. And you probably had those 2 in 2 separate if statements. So if you saw a pattern between certain things you're doing, maybe it's a repeat of how you take in some kind of input, you can go ahead and turn that into its own function. So sometimes we can create functions in order to actually be able to either make our code look simpler or even just make it look nicer. Like in this case, maybe I could do something called, let's call this print menu. I'll explain what this is in a bit. And I could do this as give some kind of give response. Alright, so this is what we call a function call. And kind of like how you see up here with main and the parentheses, you'll notice that this is what we call the function name. So print menu would be the function name. These parentheses, we'll mention what those are in a bit, but know that a name with parentheses indicates that it's some kind of function. So it is a piece of code that will do a series of other code. Now something like this you'll find in maybe other programs because it's kind of self-explanatory. So print menu, and it gives some kind of response based on the user input. Now to actually implement this, because you'll notice it's giving an error, print menu is not defined. You'll see the method print menu is undefined. And there we go. This one, the method or function give response is undefined. So we've called functions, but they don't exist. So if you want it to actually do something, you will create it outside of the main method, inside of your class. So please remember that. Remember you have these braces. These braces are related to the main function. And then these braces, everything inside of it is related to the class, so to the code itself, week 6. So if you want to create a new function, make sure you're outside of the main method, inside of the class, and you could go ahead and set it up similar to what we have here with the main method. Although here you'll start it out with static. So static means it's going to be related to this class. So specifically week 6. So this function is related to this program, this class specifically. Just like how this main method is related to this program, week 6. So you have to say static, it's related to this specific class. And you're going to indicate something called the return type. So the return data type. The return data type would be like up here, main is void, and that's actually what we'll do here, void. We'll talk about what the return type is, but in this case, void means that it's just going to do something. So in our case, we're going to just print a menu. So let's go ahead. So the return type is void. That means it doesn't turn anything. It just does instructions. And then we'll say the name. So we're going to do print menu. So that name that we're going to use for the function. Then you do your parentheses. And finally, your braces. And mine's autofills, but make sure you have the opening and the closing braces. Okay, and you'll notice this error fixes itself because now we finally defined a function. So every time you define a function like this, you could call it up here, print menu. Let me go ahead and comment this out for now. Perfect. So this is how we define a function. We have defined a function called print menu, so this is its name. And the return type is void, meaning it just does something. Now what I mean by that is maybe if we want to print a menu, here we go. Let me get the system.out.println, and we want to say print hello. Oh, I forgot. If we want to do those quotes, we're going to have to go ahead and do the backslash. So remember your escape characters. If you want to do quotes, you have to do the backslash and then the quotes. So just keep that in mind if you're printing stuff out. But I'm just going to print out some kind of menu in which you could choose one of these numbers and it will do something. So this one says 1. It'll print hello. Oh, I accidentally cut it. There we go. The next one, maybe it'll just be like meow. So print, so for 2, print meow. And this one will print bark. Okay, so now if I run this, notice that these print statements are not in our main method, but if I run it, the start of program, then when it gets to print menu, you'll see that what the program will do is it'll say, okay, print menu, we have to go to the function that's declared as print menu or defined as print menu. So then it'll hop over here and then go in order, print out this, execute this line, execute this line. So that's why you see these print statements, print hello, print meow, 3, print bark. Once it ends, then it'll go back. There we go. So it ended. And it will continue on with the execution, so end of program. So that's the beauty of functions. You can condense, especially if you have maybe a large menu, like with multiple options, you could just condense it down to a print menu, put whatever you want in here, whatever functionality, and then you just call it in your main method like this. And note, if I keep on calling print menu, so you can call it multiple times, just remember, call its name, print menu. There we go. And I could keep on copying and pasting it, but it will always go ahead. Every time it reaches that statement, it'll go down here, go sequentially. So in this case, it'll go, okay, print menu, the function's here. So let's go ahead and do this, this, and this. All right, it's done. Now, oh, print menu again. Then it goes back. Okay, print menu, this, 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 and so on. So if I run this, there we go. You see, I didn't have a bunch of this copy and paste it over here. It's just been condensed down to print menu, and it does the same code over and over again. So it's not a loop, we've just condensed the code. Because notice if I get rid of this one, it'll just do that same code, if I run it, 3 times. And if I get rid of this, it does that chunk of code 2 times. So just know every time, let me cut this and put it after this over here. There we go. So every time you call that, it's just going to go ahead and do that portion of code. So print hello, meow, bark, and you'll notice it does it after the end of program because I've added that code at the end. Okay. So again, something like this would be nice if, for instance, you didn't want that chunk of code, you want to condense it down, and sometimes it's even a little more readable. You'll know, okay, this is the menu for the code, it'll print out here. So that's one way in which you could use functions, just condensing something down into a easily readable format. Another thing you can do, and we'll do with the give response, is, here, let's see. Okay. So again, it's red because we haven't defined it yet, but we could go ahead and define it. But in some cases, maybe let's do this. So if we want some kind of, let's say, functionality with this function, instead of having it just print something out, you can actually use it to kind of do, let's say, some type of calculation. So like here, let's go ahead, let's create a new variable. So this will be int choice, and let's go ahead and we have to use our scanner. So let's import our scanner. So import java.util scanner. Let's create our scanner class. So let's do it here. Scanner, or in some cases stdin. I'll name it that. stdin equals new scanner system.in. Okay, so we have a choice and we're going to use the scanner, so std.in equals next int. So we're getting some kind of choice based on what we got here, and you'll notice, hey, the next int that has parentheses behind it, isn't that a function? Yes, it is. This specific function is used to take in input. We'll talk about pre-built functions in a moment, but just know anything that has, there we go, some kind of name with parentheses afterwards, that is most likely a function. Okay, so in our case, we're actually going to go ahead, so we're going to print the menu, and we're going to have a chunk of code basically saying, okay, based on the response we give it, it's going to go ahead and do something. So we can actually pass it through as an argument. So let's go ahead and just put in choice inside the parentheses. So whatever you put in the parentheses is considered what we call an argument. It's information that we can pass through for the function to work with. So in that case, if I want to declare this function, let's make it let's make it another void. So static void, and the name is give response, so we're going to say, okay, give response, and again the parentheses autofills for me, but I'm going to go ahead and inside of these parentheses I'm going to say int a, and afterwards we'll do our braces. There we go. So up here, choice is what we consider an argument. That means any data we pass through. Down here, A is what we call a parameter. So you could define functions. With a set of parameters, meaning that this is data that we could send through. Let me go ahead and pull up MS Paint so I could show you kind of how this is working. Okay, so let's go ahead here. Let's say in the blue, I'm going to have my function call. So I'm just going to give here. Actually, I'm going to shorten it to give res as give response. And we have some kind of variable. So in our case, it's choice. There we go. That we put in the parentheses. Now in red, I'm going to go ahead. This is our definition. This is our definition of the function. And we've said, hey, for this function, you need to pass through a type int. So some kind of value or variable that's type int. And it'll go ahead and be able to use this variable a based on that value it's put in. So you could think of it as, there we go. So let's go ahead. You could think of it as a tunnel connecting these two. So if choice, let's say, is 3, then that's going to go through and be given to a. So if choice equals 3, and it's passed through as an argument, then the parameter a will also equal 3. If choice has 2, a will also be 2. If for whatever reason choice is 0, a will also be 0. Basically, you're just passing the information through so you could use it in the function. Now the reason for that is we can't say, so in this case we're going to use branching if statements to say if choice is 1, you print out hello. If choice is 2, you print out meow. If choice is 3, you print out bark. But we can't say if choice equals 1 because choice does not exist within this function. Choice only exists within the main method. So you've only declared it here. It cannot exist outside of these braces if you've declared it in here. So for us to do that, we have to actually pass in that data. So that's why we created that tunnel. We've passed in this data to a. So you'd have to use whatever you declared this parameter. So a equals 1. So going back to our MS Paint, let's go ahead, let's create a border. So everything going on here is the main method. So this is happening in main. Everything over here is happening within your give response function actually. So it's happening inside of this give res. Okay, so you're connecting, there we go. So we're connecting whatever's passed here. That is going to be a. So now we could go ahead and use a and print out based on what that is. So let's say I'm just stealing the system.out.println, and this one will just say hello, and we'll just do the rest for else if a equals 2. We'll print out, this one was meow, else if a equals 3. We'll print bark. So now if I run this, let's see what happens. And let me take a look. Forgot to close this. Let's go ahead and close a cdn dot close. There we go. So now let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so start a program, we come across this function, and remember in your head you're thinking, okay, so print menu, it jumps down here, executes everything within print menu, then it returns. Then we're asking for, there we go, so we've created a variable choice, so a variable that will hold an int, and we've had the scanner, so stdin, call the function that is waiting for a response. So next in, it's waiting for a response. So now when I type in, let's do 2, enter. There we go. And you'll see, okay, so 2 is now stored in choice. And choice, so the value in choice is being fed into this function called giveResponse. So the program is going to say, okay, giveResponse is down here. And we're going to pass in that 2 from choice into this variable a, or this parameter a. And now we're going to use that a and do the rest of the execution. So does 2 equal 1? No, that's false. So it skips the next one. 2 equals 2, so it prints meow. If I run this again, same thing. I'll type in this case, 3, and you see it does bark. And if I run this again, I'll type in 1. There we go. And it does hello. Okay, pretty cool. So you've noticed, if I like take all of this, if I push all this back down and we just see this, we know, okay, so it'll print out a menu, it'll ask the user of a choice, and it'll give the user a response based on the choice. So you could see a little more readable as compared to, let me bring that back, as compared to probably having this chunk of code and then this chunk of code. So both for readability, and if you ever want to, maybe in some other part of the program, print out the menu again, you could just call that function. Or if you want to give some kind of other response, for example, maybe these are math calculations, you'd go ahead and do that. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and here, we're going to change this function, but instead of a void, so remember void means that it's just going to do something. In this case, we just printed out stuff. We still did some kind of evaluating based on the parameter turned in, but it's printing out stuff. If we want it where maybe it returns the string, so in this case, maybe we have a string response, and we want the function, instead of doing something, to just return what that response is, and then it'll go ahead down here, we'll go ahead and do system.out println, print out that response. Or even say here, the response is colon, quote, concatenate with the plus, the response is response. Notice it's giving me a red because it's a void function, meaning it's supposed to just do something, that returns something. But if you wanted to return, in this case we want type string, you would replace void with that data type. So we could say string give response. There we go. And you'll notice it gives me another error saying, hey, this has to return a type string, not just print stuff out. So every time you have a function with some kind of data type other than void, you do need to use what we call the return statement, which in this case is just return and whatever value you want return. So in this case it would be hello in quotes, hello, and with semicolon. There we go. And let's go ahead here, let's copy and paste this, and we're just going to replace these print statements. Actually, let me comment it out, but we'll just go ahead and then instead of print out meow, this one will return meow exclamation point. Instead of printing out bark, it will just return the string bark exclamation point. Let's comment that one out. There we go. And it's still giving me an error because outside, again, if these if statements may not execute at all. If I choose 4, you'll skip over these. So you still want at least something that it returns in the case of maybe this isn't chosen. So maybe you could say incorrect input. There we go. And it's happy. So remember, just make sure you're doing the return statement and return the value that is this data type. So in this case, I'm using text because the return data type is string. So now if I run this, it'll pretty much do the same thing, except now we're storing it within a string response. There we go. So there we go. We have the print menu function that occurs. Let me type in 1. It does the same thing, but we've just separated to where now give response returns here. It goes into give response. The choice is 1. So see the first one, 1 equals 1. It will return the value hello. So you could think of this as kind of like a variable that is working real time. Turns in hello, stores it within this variable, and it'll go ahead and print it out. Another way you could do this, you don't even have to store in a variable, although I do recommend it, is just go ahead and call this function inside of here. So remember, since this is a value that's returned, it'll just go ahead and bring whatever values is returned into this place. It just won't be stored within a variable. So let's go ahead and run. And same thing, if I type in 2, there you go, the response is meow. Okay. So that's how you would make and use a function. In this case, we had one which was static, so it just did something like print menu. So it just printed out a menu. We went over the different parameters that you put in, so data that we have to pass through in order for the function to actually work with, and then different return types. So in this case, we did string, and it has to turn in a string. We could also do, let's do a real quick one where it's, so remember we start out definition with static. Let's do int, so this will return some kind of int. Let's call this addition. So this will be a function called addition, which will take in some 2 parameters. So to do that, kind of like how we did up here, we're going to have int, maybe we're just going to call this a, then do comma int b. So these are 2 parameters that can be turned in. Do our, there we go, do our braces. And we could do this straightforward, returned a plus b. Perfect. So now if we do, let's comment all this out. And I'm going to say system.out print line addition 2 and 3. There we go. And oh, there we go. So now when we come across here, so it goes through the program, we have system.out.println and the function addition 2 and 3. So remember, I did 2 comma 3 because we have 2 parameters now. We have 2 arguments we're passing through. So 2 is going to go to int a, and 3 is also going to be another pipeline, which puts that value to b. So now 2 plus 3 equals 5, so you'll see it prints out 5. So know that you could put multiple parameters. You could have it turn in more arguments. You just got to make sure that it's in order. So again, 2 will go straight to A, 3 will go straight to B. If you mix it up, like in this case, if 3 is first, 3 will then go into A, and if 2 is here, 2 will go into B. Now that may not seem as much as for you now, but if you're working with other things, like let's say maybe this is a different function and the second parameter is a string, that would matter a lot. So you do have to make sure that 1, the order matches up, and 2, that the types match. Notice I can't put 2.5 here because this is an int, this is a double, it will not fit. So just do note that when you're creating different functions. If you need assistance with creating different functions, how the parameters work, you can come into the student hours or message me to know maybe more tips and tricks in using this. But just know this is the beauty of functions. You could basically have your, you could condense your code into a single piece. So in this case, we have addition. This is a very simple example, but if you have maybe kind of like how you had with the store, where if you want to get the total, you could have 3 different values for different items and then do that calculation. You don't have to keep on doing it up here. You would just call this function get total and do that calculation. So just know that there's different ways in which you could utilize functions, either to just help you read your code or even to help you with coding in general. Like again, the point of functions is to, 1, make it readable, and 2, help your life. Because if there's something you're doing over and over again, just create a function to do it for you. Now, speaking of making your life easier, let me go ahead. I'm going to pull up a screen. There we go. So within the PowerPoint notes I provided, and also in the readings, they provide this link to Oracle. So remember, they're the developers of Java. And this is some of the documentation. More specifically, this is the Java API library. Now, there are developers out there that have gone ahead and created different, as we call it, packages full of code that you could use yourself. So remember over here, the scanner class, that was created by another developer with the package called java.util. So that's what this part is. That's a package. And they created something called the scanner in which you could use, and you notice it makes your life easier because that's how we get input. So just like that, there are a lot more packages you could use which can help with different things that you're doing. In our case, I will go ahead. Java base is basically, here, I'm going to click there and you'll see it's a package. It'll take you to more packages within here. Or in this case, well, these are more modules, but you could think of it as groupings of packages we could use. So if we go here, different packages. One of them being called java.lang. There we go. And java.lang is something that's already incorporated into your code. So you'll notice you don't have to import it here because it's already a base part of Java. So more specifically, so that's one package. Make sure you're reading the textbook or the notes to know specifically about java.lang. But here, java.math, let's take a look there. There we go. And here is some other things you could use within this context. So you could take a look at through some of these. That was just me showing you a little bit of how to explore with this API. Again, they have different things here that you could already click through. And well, if I go back to the base and we go to lang, you'll see again there's these different, there we go, so different interfaces. We'll talk about what that is in a little bit. Different classes, like if I click on Boolean, you'll see how these work. So you could read about how these different classes work. You'll see that there's notes on how to use it. There we go. Different ways in which you could bring it up into existence, and notice different methods, different functions you could use, along with how to use them. For your project, if you're looking for, I provided notes for, or hints on different functions you can use. You could go ahead and up here just search throughout the API library. So let me go back. And in this case, I'll have you look up just math. So capital M, just math. There we go. And up it takes us back here. Not quite. So math and java.lang.math. So remember the java.lang package. There we go. And then you have the math class, which this is what you'll be somewhat working with. So the math class is again already incorporated into Java, but there's different things you could use with it. In this case, different methods. So some of them you could see different divisions, kind of like how we had the addition here. They work similarly. So let's take a look at this one. So if you want to use maybe some kind of function which will get the minimum, the smaller of two integer values, which does exist here, called min, it'll kind of show you how it works. So you'll see, all right, so it's static int, so you see this part is what it will return, what return type, what kind of value. That's the name of the class, min. And then you got these two parameters which it will use. And you'll see that it will return the value of the two smaller values. If you want to learn more about it, you could click on the name and you could see different, there we go. You could see more of the description of what it does, specifically what each parameter means. So A is one argument, B is another argument, a little self-explanatory. Some of them are a lot more descriptive. And then it'll just tell you what it returns. So that's basically all you need to know. Its name, what data do you have to give it to work with, and what will it spit out. So I could actually go ahead and use this in my program. So let's go ahead. Let me comment this part out. And if I have int one number, or let's just use it directly. So let's go ahead and do a system.out.println. And within here, again, you could do a calculation, which can directly be printed out. But if I want to use that, I'm going to have to use the class math. So remember, this is all part of the math class. So I can't just say right now, min parentheses 1, 3. It won't let me. I have to go ahead and do math dot min. So we're saying, hey, from the math class, do this function min. So now if I run this, there we go. It returns 1 because 1 is less than 3. If I do 5, it returns 3 now because 3 is less than 5. So you could either do this directly, or I could store it in a variable. As long as the variable matches the return type, so in this case int, I could copy and paste this. So copy, paste. Don't forget our semicolon, and just do print out less than so we could see the result. There we go. So I could run that, and there we go, 3. If I do this to 100, this will return now 5. Okay, so again, this is a function you can use. Some other things is, here, let's take a look. We could even just take a look here. If we want to, or let's go back. If we want to do, let's say, oh, there we go, 2 degrees. So we could turn something 2 degrees, and again, you could take a look and see more of the description of what it does. So radians 2 degrees, if you're working with angles, this would be something good for you. They have a function for that, and it'll do just that calculation. So if I go ahead and use this, you just got to make sure to, again, use the math, and then you say 2 degrees. Notice down in Eclipse, it'll offer it to you. So since it knows you're using the math class, it'll see what functions you're using. So 2 degrees, and you notice that the description is also given here. So that's a plus about using an IDE. So just make sure you're using it correctly. So in this case, 2 degrees, we have to give it some kind of double. So maybe we just want to do 56.60. There we go. And this does return, let's take a look, this does return a double. So remember, whatever the data type it returns, the variable has to match. So double answer. There we go. And I could return answer, and it'll give us some value. There we go. So apparently this radian number will convert to this degree number. I don't work with angles a lot anymore, but just know if you're working with some kind of calculations, you got functions for that. Okay. So that's the math library that you will be working with. Let me comment these out. And the thing you will be working with is strings. So just make sure that, here, let's go ahead and find the string class. So again, you could search for its string, and you do have different strings. We want Java lang string. And same thing, kind of like with the math class, it'll give you, if you scroll down, well, this is how to create different strings, but there we go, method summaries. These are different methods you could use with some kind of string value. So whether that's a string literal or some variable that's a string, you could still use it. Just make sure that you're calling the string class and going ahead and seeing what that method does. Like for instance, let's see, I know there's one called toLowercase. So for example, let's do this just real quick. I'm going to create a string. We're just going to call this text. And I'm going to have to say hello world in all caps. So if I would print that out, here, let's go ahead. We're going to print out text. Whoop. There we go. It's in all capitals. Now, if I want to, for whatever reason, sometimes you need to put things to lowercase, I could say text. Actually, in this case, I'll say string to lowercase. Some people will think it's like this. Whoop. Hold on. There we go. So some people think it's like this. And it says, oh, to lowercase. Why isn't it working? I've called the class string. I said to lowercase and I put in the text. Why is it not working like the math classes? Well, again, that's because of how it works. So in this case, to lowercase doesn't, you notice it doesn't take in the parameter. It has nothing in its parentheses. It's actually just part of the string itself. So since string is actually considered a class. So notice that we use the capital S. This is considered a class. So that means, just like with the scanner, instead of doing this, you'll actually call text and then say to lowercase. So just make sure you're reading the documentation of how that works with this API library. So there we go. In our case, we had to say text dot call the function, and it'll go ahead and get whatever's in text and do it to lowercase. And actually, we don't even have to return it like that. We could just, here, let me put this out here, colon, and we just call text. So now if I run this, oh, it seems like we do have to actually turn it. And that's all my fault for not reading it, because we'll note, there we go, it does return string. So it's not void. We do have to return a string. So we still have to store it in the text itself. So let's do that. Let's correct it. Text equals text to lowercase. So now if we run it, there we go. It goes from all capitals hello world to lowercase hello world. So you'll be using those pre-built functions in your project. So just make sure you're looking at the API library of how that works. Specifically, you're going to look for, let me type it out so you can know exactly which ones you'll be looking at. It's your java.lang.math and your java.lang.string. So those will be the two that you're looking for. Make sure you're going to those methods, look at what parameters they're taking in, what does it return, read into it, because again, just like with this lowercase function, it does work a little differently as compared to the math classes up here. Okay, I'll leave it that for this demonstration video. Again, if you need any assistance, please send me a message so we can either go over it through text or over a Zoom call. All right, thank you.